David.
Hi, Rosabelle. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I've got a bit of a croaky throat. I think I've got a cold, maybe, again.
I know. I was thinking. I've been waking up feeling like I'm about to get sick.
Do you think that's because we have some kind of a deep friendship connection, maybe?
Yeah, we just copy each other.
So today's episode, in order to be a bit more lighthearted and upbeat, we're going to be sort of talking about death and dying.
That's fun.
Do you have any thoughts on death? What comes to mind?
We all do it, don't we? That's something that everybody gets to experience. Well, I think what it makes me think about is how we have very different relationships to death. Because I feel like you're quite worried about it, or it sort of shapes your life in quite a different way to how it shapes mine. I feel not like I'm ready. I'm not ready for death, but
Ready now.
I'm not. It doesn't I don't wake up worried about it in the same way that I think you do, but I do worry about losing people around me.
Do you have a will?
Yeah, I do. I actually just changed my will. I have to go sign it tomorrow.
Oh, what's changed?
Well, I need to talk to you about this actually because I've just added you. Added it. I've changed
What?
it so that you will be. I need someone to give out my stuff.
Oh, I'm going to be the executor.
Yeah.
So wait, when you die, the gift you're giving me is like work to do.
Oh, wasn't that the greatest gift of all? You're being me, you get to decide who gets a little piece of me. No, you get some stuff as well, but that's private.
I'm David Farrier, a New Zealander accidentally marooned in America, and I want to figure out what makes this country tick. Now, something I've been fascinated by is how Americans think about death, because on one level, the country seems to be okay with it. You watch any American action movie, and pretty quickly the death count starts to get up into the double figures. Take John Wick alone. He killed 77 people in the first film and 128 in the second. By the time part 4 came out, Keanu Reeves had murdered 439 baddies. So on one level, Americans seem really comfortable with the concept of people dying and certainly keep selling a lot of guns. But on the other hand, Americans don't like to think about dying themselves. I'm about to make a very generalized statement here, but like a lot of countries in the West, America doesn't like looking death in the eye. Mortality is sort of placed off to the side while in the pursuit of the American dream. So when death does arrive, it's up to everyone else to clean up the mess. Maybe that's why in more recent years, America has popularized a new job, a new profession, that of the death doula. And from what I can tell, death doulas are a little bit like birth doulas, except instead of helping out as a new life comes into the world, they're there to help people shuffle off at the end. They're like the Grim Reaper, but without the grim bit. I wanted to find out about the job of death dueling and how death doulas are trying to help Americans accept the fact that despite what some tech gurus might say, they're probably not going to live forever. Death is coming, and apparently we can do death in a way that involves less kicking and screaming. So start thinking about how you want to die, where you want to die, and what you're going to do with all those passwords and social media accounts, because this is the Death Doula episode.
Flightless bird touchdown in America. I'm a flightless bird touchdown in America.
Rob, hello.
Hello, David.
Death.
Well, before we get to death, probably
We've got
should
some
let
big news.
people know.
Right now, as we sit here, we are something different. We're on camera. We're filming.
We are.
We had a revelation. You had a revelation recently. We were sitting in your studio space recording
which is a video studio
Flightless
place.
Bird, and we're surrounded by cameras.
Yep.
And you kind of looked up and you sort of said, oh, we probably could do a video version of this podcast.
Pretty easily. It's just turning a couple cameras on and
Yeah. And it was a very funny thing because as you said that, I looked around the room as I'm doing now and I just saw all these cameras and all we needed to do was kind of turn them on.
And we had all these birds lying around too. So
the set's really beautiful. Look, if you're listening to this, wherever you're listening to it, we have a YouTube channel now. Apparently that's what all the kids are doing. So if you go to youtube.com/@flightlessbirdpodcast, you'll find us. So it's youtube.com/@flightlessbirdpodcast. You can watch us talk and you can see this beautiful studio space we're in, which to your credit, Rob, I think you've done a really beautiful job of setting this up. It looks cool.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the idea of YouTube is we can reach more people if we're on YouTube.
Yeah, completely.
If you listen to this, you can keep listening to it and it stays exactly the same, and that's great.
Apparently, I've heard there are a lot of people on YouTube.
People do like it.
I think we've done quite a neat thing where we've also, for the documentary aspect of this, which is, there's this 20-minute audio documentary as part of Flightless Bird, we've
wanted to make it harder to make.
Did. Yeah, I know at the beginning we said we're just filming ourselves. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. A lot of work went into this, but part of it was animating and making that doc visual. And I think head over to see what we've done with it. Because, sometimes you want to know what someone looks like, who I'm talking to, or there's certain photos I take when I'm doing these documentaries, and we wanted to incorporate that visually as well. And I think we've done a pretty great job of that.
But also don't set your expectations too high. We wanted to keep it simple enough to where our small team of me, you, and two others, Billy and Jake.
It's literally four of us.
Can still make the show.
Completely. So I'm not going out with my dark tourist documentary crew and filming these audio documentaries. It's still audio, but we also, I was telling Rob, I was like, why don't we just have a little waveform going for 20 minutes on YouTube? It's fine. But we're like, no, we want to make this visual in a way that adds to what the documentary is. So if I'm talking about something and you're like, what is Dave talking about? What's Rob mentioning? You can see what we're talking about on YouTube. I think it's pretty nifty what we've come up with.
We'll see. Hopefully people like it.
The other thing, I thought, because we are on video, I'm going to hold up these t-shirts we've got. We're everywhere. This is okay, I'm not going to keep doing this all the time. Right now, for anyone listening, I'm holding up the Flightless Bird t-shirt. We've got two of them. They've been flying out the door, which is cool. They're at webworm.store online.
Go to that camera.
This camera here. We've got one that's got a beautiful illustration by a New Zealand illustrator, Charlie, that has 3 of New Zealand's flightless birds. One of them is grabbing a microphone, and the other one is a beautiful kiwi bird, and the kiwi has an American trucker cap on. They're really cool t-shirts, and you can get them now. So that's kind of the admin, right?
Yeah.
Now on to the lighthearted topic of death. So in the documentary, I go into my fear of death. But before we go into that, I just wanted to know, we've talked about this a bit before, but how you view...
I hate death.
Okay.
I hate death. I think about it a lot. Mm-hmm. It's probably my biggest fear.
Is it the idea of life ending, or is it how it might get near the end? What's the fear?
It's the infinite nothingness beyond being dead.
Okay.
Which I get if I'm not conscious of it, then it's well,
someone
really
explained it to me. It's like before you were born, you weren't conscious. You're basically going back to that. That doesn't help me.
No, I actually I hate talking about this even now. It freaks me out of just of nothing.
Yeah, and I think some people don't have that issue, and I think that's where. So someone emailed us a while ago now, and I just wanted to read it because this is what got me thinking about death doulas. Because the idea of a death doula is it's someone who helps people like you and me come to terms with what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So Emily wrote in a while ago from Australia. She said, if you do the topic, I hope you're able to touch on the stark differences in medical practices around death in the US being so different to other OECD countries. The trope of desperate family members trying and crying to doctors to do everything you can to save grandma is quite true in the US, where patients and family can quite literally dictate the life-saving measures that doctors take, which may include rib breaking, CPR, shoving tubes down the throat of some 94-year-old who's unlikely to survive it, or worse, prolong their suffering. And so I just thought they touched on an interesting point and I've noticed this, and I just think in America, because there is really good medicine here if you have access to it.
Yeah.
I think there is this really strong idea in America of we have the technology, so we're going to keep you living for as long as possible. Like, we're going to keep delaying death. And I think the idea of death dueling is going, no, like, it's not all about prolonging it if it's going to be horrible. It's like coming to terms with the fact that death is happening, and that is maybe okay.
Yeah, I don't love that. I think the weird thing that we maybe share is there's this kind of religious aspect to it where neither one of us are religious.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to be wrong and that there's something beyond death. Like,
I know.
That would be my dream.
Yeah, completely. Because did you grow up thinking there was more at any point? Yeah. You had that belief.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's like we're here and then it ends, but then there's like this other great bit.
Yeah. And then I even just thinking about death like makes me panicky.
Are you with it? We're so similar in that, and I don't understand that people that don't panic. Yeah. I'm like, I want to shake you. What is wrong with you?
When does it come out for you?
Like, it's if I'm having the worst ever is that point where I'm drifting off to sleep, or when I wake up and I'm kind of in that drifty state and it hits me like a freight train.
Yeah, that's me too. At night it gets real panicky where like sometimes I have to get out of bed and just like pace around.
I didn't realize like quite how similar we were on this. Okay, actually I got this thing off the internet, the death deck. And this is something I'll talk about this later. I did a death meditation a couple of weeks ago, and they recommended getting this. And it's just like fun ways to start. If you are like us and you're like terrified of dying, it's just there's a bunch of like party games that you can do with this.
sounds fun.
I just want to ask you a few of these because it's like a little social breaker. Which of these eco-friendly burial options would you consider for your remains? Do you want to be recomposted, where you're essentially thrown in the dirt and sort of melt down, aquamation, which is cremation by water, or green burial, biodegradable casket, no urns, no embalming?
All right, so let me, before I answer that, do you ever have this where when I think about what I want to do to my body after I die, part of me wants to keep it preserved in case there is technology in the future where they can bring me back to life?
Yeah, cryogenics.
No, I don't want cryogenics.
Well, you just want it preserved?
I just want it not to be like cremated. So like if they come up with some sort of technology that's like, all right, we can bring your soul and brain back to life.
You're not an ash so that you can do something with it.
Yeah.
So what are you imagining? If it's not being frozen, what are you imagining? Just kind of like...
I don't really... There's not a lot of logic behind... Not stuffed. I think even just like buried in a
you don't want to be obliterated.
Correct.
You don't want to be set on fire.
But I can also think like logically... If that technology exists, they're not just going to go through a graveyard and be like, let's bring them back.
Yeah, exactly.
And then there's population issues. And
I mean, this is a whole other topic I want to do is cryogenics in the United States, because there are plenty of people that either have their bodies or just their heads on ice here. That's like a big thing. My fear is that if I'm not cremated, there's a chance, like in Ryan Reynolds' Buried film, that I will be buried alive accidentally and will wake up in a coffin. That's also a huge fear of mine because I'm incredibly claustrophobic.
But that fear, though, you wake up in when they're cremating you.
Oh, there's that.
I mean, I think they check all of those things. You're on ice for long enough, too, that you're not going to accidentally wake up.
But we've all heard those freaky stories where like people wake up at their own funeral. Movie. In the Ryan Reynolds film. There was a story recently where someone woke up at their own funeral.
Back to your question, I guess, would be the like buried biodegradable.
Okay, just slowly melting into the earth.
Yeah, I like the idea of it going back into the earth. And by it, my dead corpse.
Stay tuned for more Flightless Bird. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Flightless Bird is brought to you by Helix Sleep. Now, I've talked about sleeping a lot before on this podcast because I love Helix sleep. I sleep on a Helix midnight mattress and I get really great sleeps. And so I have very few qualms about telling listeners of this show to go and get a mattress because they're great. You order it online, you take a really simple quiz, which looks at how you sleep, backside, all those things you're after.
What kind of a sleeper are you, David?
I tend to start on my back and then I'll flip onto my side. I'll do about 10 seconds of stomach a night. I love about 10 seconds, but I can't do any longer. So basically, long-term side.
How does that work with your blanket? Are you getting really tangled up in your blanket?
Oh, I get tangled. I'm remaking that bed every morning. No matter how much I tuck it in, those sheets are following me in my little tumble all night, and it's a mess. For a limited time, our listeners can get 25% off site-wide plus 2 free Dream Pillows with any mattress purchase. Or you can take advantage of the free bedding bundle. That's 2 Dream Pillows, a sheet set, and a mattress protector for free with any Luxe or Elite mattress order. Just visit helixsleep.com/bird. That's helixsleep.com/bird. Support for Flightless Bird comes from OneSkin. Now, this holiday season is tough on skin. Things are getting colder, there's stuffy indoor heating, and non-stop festivities can lead to a dull, dehydrated complexion. And that's where today's sponsor, OneSkin, comes in. Their scientifically proven products are designed to support your skin at the cellular level so it looks and feels healthier and holiday ready. I've been using a OneSkin moisturizer on my face.
You look much more hydrated than you normally do.
I honestly, I genuinely feel really good. I've never used a moisturizer until this product started turning up because we are advertising them. So of course I have to use this stuff. I'm putting it on. I'm loving it. I don't know how I've gotten away without using a moisturizer before.
For a limited time, try OneSkin for 15% off using code BIRD when you check out at oneskin.co. This holiday season, invest in your skin's long-term health because healthy skin is a gift.
Yeah, treating the symptoms rather than the root causes of aging has long-term been the norm, including for me. At 41, I am getting really old. Most skincare available on the market is designed to provide a temporary reduction in visible signs of aging, addressing just the surface symptoms of an underlying decline in skin health.
OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. OneSkin addresses skin health at the molecular level, targeting the root causes of aging so skin behaves, feels, and appears younger.
Yes.
It's time to get started with your new face, eye, and body routine at a discounted rate today.
Get 15% off with the code BIRD at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code BIRD. After you purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. We only have one body, one skin, and only you can choose to make it better. Age healthy with OneSkin. Okay, you have a pet, Rob. Would you attend the funeral of a pet? Yes, our furry, feathered, and scaly friends are totally worthy of a funeral service. 2, maybe, depends on the pet. C, no, I'm going to flush it down the toilet. Just think of that beautiful, fluffy little dog that you have. Calvin and Vincent, they're crying. They're like, oh no.
I mean, I could see there being like a backyard burial type situation. I'm not going to go to a church and rent out like a hall and...
You're not going to do a whole service.
A banquet and...
Yeah, but backyard burial, say a few words.
I feel like I could give that to a pet.
Okay, last one. At what age did you attend your first funeral or memorial? Under 10 years, over 10 years, or when you could legally drink?
Yeah, under 10 years, but it was for like my grandma's sister.
Okay.
So I didn't have a ton of association with the
It wasn't someone super close.
There was a period between like 2008 and 2018 where all my grandparents died.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
How old were you ballpark then?
This was like mid-20s.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
mid-20s, mid to late 20s.
That sucks. That's sad.
Yeah. So there was a handful of funerals there.
Yeah. I'm yet to have a parent pass away or a friend that I'm like super, super tight with. Like Rosabelle hasn't died yet.
I have had a friend pass too.
Did that help or make it more scary, the idea of your eventual demise?
So I think my demise to me is also in combination with time and how time moves.
Oh yeah.
And that like
it speeds the fuck up.
Feel like it's happening too fast. And that like I'm laying in bed one night and it's now and it's tonight. And I can remember laying in bed on Christmas Eve
Yeah.
2018, and that feels like a flash where like these memories feel so recent that it feels like things are moving. And then I go the opposite direction where I'm like, this is going to feel like a flash when I'm on my deathbed.
I know. It's that time parallax thing where the older you get, the quicker it goes because you've got more in your rear vision mirror. And it's terrifying to me how quickly the weeks go by now.
But I'm making the connection from past to present and then doing the same from present to future.
Yeah, right.
And that freaks me out a lot. That's what's happening at night when I'm sitting there panicking of like...
We're so similar.
Yeah.
And I guess this is what like the midlife crisis is partly about, right? Like that's why people have this moment when they hit that point of halfway where they go, this isn't where I want things to be.
It slows down time when you start to make things novel and like you're not just settled into your routine.
Completely.
That's why like trips I love like
anything that snaps you out of that like daily thing of like, oh, it's 10 o'clock again, I'm in the same bed.
Yep.
Same thing. Groundhog Day.
This feels like yesterday, and it feels like now, and then it feels like a week ago. It feels like now. That's why I like love rearranging my room. And
I think we both need
a death
doula. Do you want to learn about death dueling?
Let's do it.
Let's learn about death dueling. Let me start by making something really clear. I do not like the fact I'm going to die. For the most part, I love being alive. I like my friends and my family, and I like making documentaries. I love writing my investigative newsletter Webworm, and I love this podcast. I don't want any of that to end by me dying. But since my mid-20s, I've hated the concept of dying. It might have something to do with my stepping away from a belief in the afterlife, something I'd held true and close for a really long time. Suddenly, mortality was real, and I didn't like it much. Most of the time, it's fine. Like most of us, I run through life desperately trying to distance myself as much as possible from the idea of death. Any spare moment when the realization of my eventual demise may creep in, there's a story to chase, a film to watch, or a podcast to podcast. But sometimes I remember I'm going to die. It catches me by surprise. If I dare to take a nap, existential dread will suddenly snap into focus, my dulled, dozy state letting the barriers down long enough for the reality to hit me like a freight train, which also happens to be a way you can die. Freight trains. Dying means things are over, and I'm not happy with that. I needed a death doula.
My name is Elua Arthur, and I'm a death doula.
Elua's been doing this gig for about 10 years now, the whole death doula thing. She's also an attorney, part-time professor, and author of a New York Times bestseller called Briefly Perfectly Human. So, since I got to America, I have discovered that doulas are a real thing here for certain people, mainly with childcare. My neighbor has a doula to help out so she can maintain some sanity. Never heard of a death doula until I heard of you.
I'm not surprised by that. But I like to think that that's changing. And also it makes it a little bit easier if you have some familiarity with a birth doula. You can kind of triangulate what a death doula does.
The whole concept of birth dueling goes way back to prehistoric, pre-American times. But the modern doula emerged in America in the 1960s, first with birth dueling, later with death dueling.
Well, I think the concept is as ancient as humankind itself. I think we probably just formalized it in a way here. I think in a lot of other cultures, there are folks that have been doing this work in the community for a really long time, and everybody just understands that this is who you go to when somebody's dying and they come and help you out. But I think we've more professionalized it, and I'm using air quotes, and institutionalized it.
In 1998, a foundation in New York sponsored a conference on end-of-life care, where a Jewish professor talked about the importance of helping the seriously ill during the dying process. A few years later, a volunteer program started matching doulas with dying patients just to see how it went. It went really well and turned into a 6-week training program. Reading from a piece in the Natural Library of Medicine, the volunteers went through training on both clinical and spiritual aspects, including but not limited to the complexities of end-of-life healthcare, physical issues like incontinence and disorientation, and hope in the face of death.
So a death doula is somebody who does all of the non-medical and holistic care of the dying person and their circle of support through the process. And when I say the dying person, I mean anybody who has some awareness that one day death will come, which means even healthy people that have acknowledged their mortality. When people are healthy, we can help them complete comprehensive end-of-life planning. That's a really great time to start. It's when you're healthy and when you're not thinking about your death yet, because that means that you can look at it from some perspective, and ultimately it will inform how you live your life.
This is more than just getting a will in place. It's about figuring out things like a funeral plan, advanced directives in case you're in a coma, emotional support, and sorting out who gets your Twitter account once you're 6 feet under.
When people know what it is that they're going to be dying of, we can help them create the most ideal death for themselves under the circumstances. And after a death, we can help family members wrap up affairs of their loved one's life. And so it's for anybody in the life cycle, anybody who's thinking about mortality, anybody who wants to work through some of their fears about or anxieties about death, anybody really who will one day die.
And I've been reliably informed that that includes, quite possibly, all of us. And that's where the death doula comes in. They're there to get you comfortable with death. Kind of like a more positive, happy-go-lucky Grim Reaper. Now, look, I assure you, I'm not attempting to get free treatment from you, but I want to use myself as a case study.
Let's do it.
I'm in my early 40s. I made a very rudimentary will a little while ago. I hate the idea of dying. I grew up in a really Christian home where heaven was always on the table. So I think when I moved away from that a very long time ago now, death just seemed like deeply unfair. Like, I'm not happy about the concept. I think about death. If it hits me in a certain mood, it's just the worst thing I can ever think of. It's like a deep-seated fear of that. So with my very brief rundown about myself, like, would you be the sort of person that I should be talking to?
Absolutely. I heard a few things in there that are really juicy that could support to understand what this fear is, where it comes from, and ultimately what it has to teach you about your life. You talked a bit about your relationship to religion and where you initially got ideas about what happens after we die from Christianity. I heard heaven in there, but that also means there was hell in there, right?
Oh, big time.
Yeah. It's the same for me. I grew up in an evangelical Christian household too, and my first ideas about death was whoever believeth in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. Like, instantly, it was like, you won't die if you do this thing. So fear of death was already baked in there for us as we were growing up. And that's something that happens to us unconsciously. We're not even aware that we're learning to fear death or to avoid it by believing because we're going to have everlasting life. So it's already really ripe in the first thing that you said about where you learned about death and dying. I also heard you say that you don't want to think about it. It's like the worst thing ever. I'd be really curious about what's the worst part of it for you, like what that fear comes from, what makes it seem like the worst.
I guess if I hired her as a death doula, this is a sort of nitty-gritty we'd get down to, the emotional stuff that comes with death. And then there's the really boring, but sort of confusing, practical stuff too. So there's that side of things with death, but then also in a really practical way, I am very active online. You know, I've got a newsletter webworm which I run, which goes out to a lot of people and they pay me for my work. And if I die, good God, I've got to hand that over to someone. I've got to hand over my Twitter. There's all this practical stuff as well.
I also heard you say, if I die, that my Twitter and all these things, and if I die. And I wanted to stop you right there, but I figured I'd have a chance and just remind you that it's a when, in fact.
That's so funny. I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, well, I kind of live in this world, so I hear it all the time. I always think it's really funny when life insurance folks are like, if you die or if something happens to you. I'm like, something is definitely happening to you, okay? So let's just call it what it is. But, you know, we throw the if in there to deflect a little bit from this reality that makes many people very uncomfortable. So there's plenty to work with you if you'd like.
As for what to do with Webworm and my social media accounts, yeah, a death doula can come up with a handover plan if that's what you want. I talked to another death doula for this episode, and they mentioned when it comes to your social media or anything online, get a password manager like OnePass. That means all your accounts are controlled by one master password. Much better when it comes to sorting out your social media when you kick the bucket and can no longer tweet.
So one of the things that people fear with their dying is not having any control. And that looks like a lot of different things. Control over what the body looks like, what disease will bring about their death, if it'll be an accident, you know, the when and where types of questions about their dying. But also it looks like not being able to control what happens to all their stuff and their online presence and everything else after their death. And so one thing we can do to establish a little bit of control is by getting a really, really clear plan for how you want things to be handled after you die, including all your passwords for social media, all your banking information, getting a will if you don't have one already, getting a trust if you need that instead of a will, looking at things like your body and your services, what you want to have happen with your body after you die, what services that you'd like, how do you want your life celebrated, memorialized. Anybody who has been close to somebody who's died knows very, very well the bureaucratic nightmare that exists to try to wrap up their affairs after they die. And one thing that I think is really helpful for us to do, and as I was talking about control a little bit earlier, is that we get to establish a little bit of control by getting that stuff done. But also we pass on the really big gift of having our loved ones not worry about it after our death, because they're already going to be in deep grief, and then they don't also want to sit at the DMV to try to figure out what to do with your car.
And here's the bit where I insert a plug to go and listen to the DMV episode of Flightless Bird, February 23, sandwiched between Waffle House and Valentine's Day. Anyway, I'd say my big takeaway from Alua is something she covered in her TED Talk, which you should track down and watch. She talked about how once you have thought about your death and how you want to end this weird ride we call life, then the living bit can become much better.
You look at everything. You look at your relationships, you look at who you value, you look at how you're spending your time, you're looking at what you eat, how often you eat. You're thinking about your possessions, your house, your work. You're thinking about your kids. You're thinking about everything holistically when you're thinking about your death. You can't help it because your entire life is leading up until that point.
Stay tuned for more Flightless Bird. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Like a lot of people, my mum and dad back in New Zealand, no offense to them, but they're not the most technically savvy people. So it seemed really weird to get them a tech-adjacent gift, but Aura's digital frame is actually perfect. That's because, yeah, it's tech, but it's also so easy to set up. The last time I went back to New Zealand, I bought my parents an Aura frame. I sort of did it as almost a joke, like, here, have a digital frame of my face and my experiences coming into your lounge. They love it. It's like pride of place in their lounge.
We did the same thing with my parents. We sent them an Aura frame and we can just kind of load up photos of the boys. Here's a new photo of Calvin. Here's a new photo of Vincent.
My mum sent me an email saying, can you send some new photos through the frame? We haven't had new ones for a while. I could have just sent that over email, but it's almost turned into a way of updating them about what I'm doing in America is by sending them photos. So honestly, a digital photo frame is a really good gift for a friend. And what I like about it as well is that you can change it from your phone. So you can give them the gift and you can keep updating it remotely, or, you know, they can clear it and do their own thing. But I just find it such a novel, fun gift. And it just looks like a normal frame sitting on a shelf.
But yeah, it's really easy to get started. And once you do, the tech is incredible. You can upload the photos right from your phone with just a click, like you said, and it'll even pair photos together for me, like two pictures of the same person or from the same day, which is really great.
There's also no memory cards or USBs required. There's a reason why I kind of named it the #1 best digital photo frame. So for a limited time, visit auraframes.com and get $45 off Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames by using promo code BIRD at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code BIRD. This exclusive Black Friday Cyber Monday deal is their best of the year, so don't miss out. Terms and conditions apply. I should probably mention that after 10 years as a death doula, Alua now trains other death doulas in America. You have to train to be a doula, but it's done privately through various organizations. There's no central organization, so it all varies a bit state to state. But in California, Alua started her own organization called Going with Grace. I decided to go and meet with one of her recent graduates, Kathleen, to find out why people get into the death game. We met in a park. It was a sunny day, a good day to talk about death.
In some ways, I think this is what I was always meant to be doing. And I say that because I recently found something that I wrote in a journal when I was 6, just after my grandpa died. I wrote, "But love and death is part of life."
As a 6-year-old?
As a 6-year-old. I know. I actually told my son about it recently. He's almost 9. And he was like, "What in the world? You were really old at 6. So I kind of think this is something that I was maybe always meant to be doing.
Love and death is a part of life. A 6-year-old emo, or maybe a goth in the making. Years later, Kathleen found herself thinking about death again.
My uncle came to visit, and he was clearly sick. He was in late stages of heart failure, even though I'm not sure any of us really wanted to admit it. And I noticed that I was comfortable just being with him. He couldn't do a lot, but we could just be together. And that was a really comfortable position for me to be in. And I noticed it wasn't comfortable for everyone. And I think when people are dying, that's really what they need, is just someone to be with them and sit with them and not need to fill up the space with endless talking and questions. But it's hard to sit in silence. It's really uncomfortable. So that's something that I've had to kind of learn to get comfortable with.
As someone who's afraid of death, I was actually finding it quite nice to talk about it with these death doulas. I think this is a part of America I could get behind, which is sort of funny considering a lot of Americans probably hate talking about death as well.
I think, generally speaking, we're incredibly death phobic. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to look at it. Nobody wants to plan for it or acknowledge its existence, really.
Why do you think that is?
I think because death has been completely taken out of our regular life. So pre the Civil War, people would ail at home, they'd die at home, they'd be taken care of by their family, friends, and community. The body would be handled at home, they'd be laid out, people would come to visit. It was very much a normal part of our everyday lives. Somebody in the neighborhood died, you'd go, you'd pay your respects. And I think post-Civil War, that's when embalming became really common because people were dying far away from home and they needed to be brought back. And that's when the kind of whole industry of death became a thing. And people then just kind of were like, okay, we're going to just push this off on someone else. And then over time, we just don't see it anymore.
Now, death in America is sort of ignored, just like old people tend to be ignored. America might be a country that loves death in its TV and movies, but when it gets personal, they'd rather just not think about it, which is where the doula comes in.
Because you die and you're done, but everything that you touched, everything that you owned, everything about your life is still here.
It's got to be dealt with by someone.
Someone has to take over. And that's a huge burden. That can be a huge burden if you've done no planning. And I think it's a real gift that people can give their loved ones to say, here's a roadmap. Like, this is exactly what I want, down to, songs I want played at my funeral.
Good God, funeral songs. That's a tough one. Part of me wants to play the stuff I love. Another part of me wants to torture those who remain.
It's an even bigger thing when you're talking about end-of-life medical decisions. Because I've heard people say, well, who am I to play God and say, take them off life support or not? So if you have given your family a roadmap that says, if we get to this fork in the road, I want you going this direction, you're not making a decision. You're simply just honoring their wishes. And that takes a lot of the pressure and the stress and the anxiety off of your loved ones.
Now, before I wrap this episode up, I wanted to talk to Alua about a few other things.
I think overall, societally, we seem to be really obsessed with youth here and health and putting our best foot and best face forward. And people want to shun that our bodies are fragile and vulnerable and they eventually break down.
I wanted to know what she thought about America's obsession with youth and beauty, with good teeth and tight skin, tan bodies and perfect butts. Mainly, I wanted to know about how this youth obsession linked in with America's relationship to death. And so, of course, we got to talking about those Americans trying to escape our bodies for cyberspace, to escape death. The Elon Musks and Jeff Bezoses, Brian Johnson and his company Blueprint, trying to stop death entirely.
Right now is the very first time in human history where you can say with a straight face, you may not die.
You believe that?
Oh, there's no question.
Naturally, because of the work that I do, people are always like, well, what about this guy who's injecting himself with baby's blood? And that's, he's going to now live to 147. And I'm like, good for him. If it gives them something to hold on to, something to make being alive a little bit easier, then I'm all for it. However, it's probably going to be really crushing when that time comes and they realize that they too will have to die. But I'm always curious, if you want to live forever, what would you do with forever? That you're not doing with your maybe 80-something years, 90-something years, if you're lucky, that you have here. We talk about really loving our lives. Well, our death is a part of our lives. And so we don't actually love the totality of it if we can't also love the end of it. I'm loving it conditionally. I'm loving it based on the fact that I get to keep doing this. But when I'm thinking about my death, I think it allows me to love what I have even more because I know one day it will go away.
Yeah. The whole for life to have a meaning, it must have an end thing. That old chestnut. And I suppose I do have to face reality. This 41-year-old body I'm trapped in will one day die, and I'll have to figure out how to dispose of it. But how does one take out the trash when that trash is you? I'm just wondering what options are on the table here in America and what people are thinking about these days when it comes to what they do with their physical body when their brain has left the building.
Yeah. There's a lot of different options. I mean, most of them stem from the major two, burial and cremation. But even within burial, there are options now. There's a green burial where you are placed just directly in the earth with only biodegradable materials in a grave that's, not marked with a traditional marker, but rather marked by global coordinates. You can have a burial at sea where the body is set free in the ocean. You can have the body be reduced through the natural organic reduction process, also known as human composting. That's been made popular by Katrina Spade at Recompose. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea. When we're talking about cremation, there's a lot of things that you can do with the cremains, like you can make diamonds or records or pencil lead, or you can spread them anywhere. There's so many things you can do with cremains now. It's wild. Yeah, so those are, I think, still the basic ones. There's also aquamation, which is kind of like a water cremation where the body is basically in lye, gets to dissolve into its basic components, alkaline components, and then ground down, and you can do what you want with the bones and the ash, kind of like you would cremains otherwise. So there are options currently available. There are some that I hear about every few years, but still hasn't really taken off yet. One is called a capsula mundi, which is like a tree pod where apparently they put the body around like a pod, a seed of a tree, and then they plant it. So the tree gets to grow from the body.
Tell me just briefly about that ocean situation being launched into the sea. That is an option on the table?
It is an option on the table. And rather than like a launch, I'd say just like a gentle lowering. Nobody's like shooting your body out of a cannon deep into the ocean. Everybody goes on a boat at a certain distance away from shore at a particular location. And there's often a surface on the boat. And then the body is just sent gently off the side to go swim with the fishes, as the folks say.
I like the idea of a fish nibbling away on my body, maybe an American fish, a Pacific cod, or an Atlantic salmon. Would a salmon eat a human body? Probably not. I don't know. Anyway, my point is death is coming, fast. I've already noticed that thing happening where my perception of time is starting to speed up because you've got more in the rearview mirror, right? And less in the front.
Yes. I talked to a good friend who recently turned 72 and she was like, it's about to speed up. And I said, uh-oh, because already I feel like it's moving fast. But if she at 72 is saying that's going to go by in a blink, I believe her.
I'm glad I now know what a death doula is, and I've met two of them. And of course, not everyone can afford a doula, but that doesn't matter. They both told me this. Start with just thinking about what your plans are and talking about that with your loved ones. Start simple.
Talk to your family. Start having the conversation. You know how you just mentioned to me that burial at sea seems like a good choice for you? Tell somebody that you care about. See what they think. It's important that we start talking to each other about it too, because it's the people in our lives that are going to be stuck with the decisions that we make or don't make. And so let's start talking about it.
Did that help you at all, or did that just make you more scared thinking about death even more? Was there anything in there that was helpful?
There was panicky parts for sure that were not helpful. When she was talking about the value of life, and how like the fact that you die is what makes it valuable.
That's what gives it meaning.
Just live forever, then.
I had the same takeaway. I think obviously it does give life meaning. At the same time, I get excited about, I'm watching Interview with a Vampire at the moment. It's a TV show and it's actually really incredible. But obviously, it's just hit Netflix. It's a remake of the film. Entirely different vibe. If you like the show Hannibal, you'll love this. It's like very homoerotic and sexy and weird, and it's about vampires who live forever. But I go to and fro on that because I know that for life to have meaning, it needs an end. But also, I do get tempted by the idea of like, I think I could have a really good time living for 1,000 years.
Oh, if there was like a button you hit and it was live forever,
we're both doing it, right?
Immediately.
Yeah.
And I think I don't want to speak for you, but when I get panicky about it, like logic is out the window.
One thing I do think about is, I think for me, it's having a lack of control. That's what makes it harder. And I did like what you said about how if you plan out what happens, like, so you know that when you die, all your stuff sorted. Like, it's not just a will, it's like your end of life plan, all that stuff. Where your passwords go, your family's not going to be stressed. I think for me, that would make it slightly, I don't know, just thinking about that before it happens eases me a little bit, I think.
That doesn't for me. Whenever that kind of stuff comes up, I'm just like,
right.
You deal with it comes up with Natalie, where it's like we need to put our will together for the. I mean, having kids changes a lot of it.
Well, you have to do it then,
some
right?
sort
You're
of
forced to do
responsibility.
it. Yeah,
but for me, it's just like I don't want to think about it. Just like
you deal with this.
Someone take care of this. I will say though that having kids has changed my relationship with death a little bit.
In what way?
Just that there is a piece of me that lives on either way.
Oh, see, that's interesting. Like your legacy, right?
Yeah, but I don't think it's in a super ego way.
Because I don't have kids, and I've got a lot of friends that do now. I wonder what motivates me to like make things. Because I think I don't like to admit it, but I am quite. I have an ego,
right?
And I think making stuff. It is this idea of even this podcast. It'll be sitting there somewhere, and that lives on, and that's like. And I wonder if having kids is a little element of like, it's a bit of me going forward, and that feels like in a way you're cheating death by like throwing your genes forward into the future.
Yeah, I think it's that, and just like you have something that you love more than anything else now.
Yeah, so you become less selfish essentially.
Right.
Like it's less about you. So that's kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just this like me. It's like I'm secondary to these little creatures.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just need to go and procreate.
Yeah, go have a baby.
I like the idea of like turning Rosabelle into lead and putting her in a pencil if she dies before I die. Like, I would love to have a Rosabelle pencil. I find that very funny.
Have you been with anyone when they died?
No, I haven't. I've been around people who are... I had an uncle who got sick really unexpectedly, and I visited him in hospital, and I struggle with that so much. You know, what Alua was talking about of like being, it's a real skill to be at peace with someone and just be like still with them when they are in that state. I found it so awkward. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know where to look. I found that really, really hard. And they were like 2 weeks away from passing away.
I was with my papa when he passed in hospice.
Oh, right.
It was my parents and me. It was my mom's dad. Mm-hmm, and I was with him then. And weirdly, I feel like I handled death better then because it wasn't my own mortality. Like, we were there and my mom had the priest come and like he did the final prayer, and like he died at some point during the final prayer.
How was he conscious, or how were you aware of that passing?
He just stopped moving. He was already like kind of out of it at that point, in and out of things. But like he fully died while we were in the room. And then like I had to call his son and like tell him it happened. Like I just remember clicking into like a different gear where it was not like freaked out about mortality, but all right, my mom is now dealing with her dad dying. And
you needed to be there and step up for her. Yeah, completely.
And like having to call my siblings that weren't around at that time and like letting them know that this had happened.
I mean, that's a really important job. And obviously, and maybe it's because it's not your death as well, right? It's like, this is something else. I can just deal with this and be as sane as I can be.
It just felt like a weird juxtaposition of like this thing that freaks me out so much and causes so much of my anxiety, but I was able to
be completely calm and present.
Yeah.
And okay. I mean, that's kind of remarkable. Like, you need people like you around when that stuff happens. Like, you need a person to take the lead and to be able to help with that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's just a deeply seated personal thing. I'm curious how I'd react. I think, well, I don't know.
Funeral songs? What are you? I mean,
I played Creed.
You played Creed. I don't. Do you have any that you think
I was thinking about this. I mean, I don't know whether it's for me or for the people there. I don't know so I don't know. I to and fro on things. I mean, I love music so much. I've come to the conclusion that I don't want to make people suffer through what I like, but I haven't gotten anywhere since that. I mean, I had a colleague when I was working at a news network, one of the lead graphic designers, Scooter, he was like this punk goth guy. He was amazing. And it's the first funeral I've been to. He passed away. It's the first funeral I've ever been to where he planned the whole thing. Yep. So he had designed like the leaflets in there, and he had designed who was talking, what was being said, and the whole thing. I really liked that because it was like, it wasn't someone else's ideas of what they wanted. It was Scooter giving us what he wanted, and it was like being at a gig with him or a show, and it was, and I really like that, and I've often thought I would like to do that, but I just haven't got there yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the added presence of that person there. That's not just like here's the church funeral that you're used to, where
completely
X, Y, and Z are happening, and we're going to read this scripture. And
exactly. And I think what was so good about that is that he took the pressure off all the people that were left. And that's something else that was said in the doc, is that this idea that if you plan things, it's just being so helpful for people instead of scrambling around after you're gone. It's just, it's not about you anymore. You're gone. So make it easier for all of them.
I think the song I want is exit music for a film.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Or just play Funeral by Arcade Fire.
Oh my God. On the nose.
On the nose.
So a couple of weeks ago, a friend invited me to it, to a papers flying everywhere, to a it was at a yoga studio. It was essentially, it was very like, it felt very LA, but it was basically a death workshop. And there was a doula there, and it was amazing. There were maybe 20 of us that turned up, and we were all there for various reasons. We all went around in the circle talking about why we were there. I said, I was raised religious and I don't believe that anymore, so I've just been stuck with this fear. Someone was there that had a partner die. Someone was there, they were dying. It was a really incredible bunch of people. And half of the session, we did a death meditation, for instance, where we all lay down, and the doula just gently, sort of felt a bit like hypnosis, but sort of like took you through an imagined version of what your body would do when it was dying, which sounds terrifying.
Yeah. Wow. How'd you deal with that?
It was a trip, man. It was like, okay, it's like, this is now shutting down. Now this is happening. But it was done in such a peaceful way. It was helpful, where it was like thinking about what it could actually be like. Mm-hmm. Not in a kicking and screaming way. It was like, this is like a good death.
Yeah, this is best case scenario.
Yeah, it was a really neat thing to go through. And then the second half of the workshop was they gave us all the Californian Advanced Healthcare Directive. And that's the stuff where it's not a will. Mm-hmm. It's basically all the stuff about power of attorney, like who looks after decisions about your body, what happens to... I mean, it's a really long document, and I need to fill this in now, but it's basically just what healthcare you want to receive, whether you want to be resuscitated or not. And each state has a different version of this. And so I've got this sitting here now, and I think there's a big box here I'm looking at now. Choice not to prolong life, or choice to prolong life, and how hardcore I want to go at the end. Do I want them breaking my 90-year-old ribs to try and get me through another year of suffering or not? It's all that kind of stuff. And I think if I fill this out and have it done, and I have it with my will, then it might decrease my fear, because I feel like I've got a slight bit of control over it.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you feel about, have you seen The Diving Bell and the Butterfly?
Probably the worst horror film I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. It's about someone with locked-in syndrome, right?
Just can move his eyes. Would you want to be...
No, hold a pillow over my head.
Oh.
The idea of being conscious but locked in a body and not able to move. I might change my mind if that ever happens, but I think that's my panic. It's almost like being trapped in the coffin. Yeah. I found that a really hard concept to get my head around. That was a lot. What about you? You living? You sort of blinking your words out?
It's like any hope that there is coming out of it.
It would make doing this podcast quite difficult. You'd sort of be blinking out your responses. We'd have to get some sort of translator, some sort of animation going.
I'm sure AI's getting there.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't want to be kept alive. Send me off. I'm done.
But then you still have this idea of like uploading your consciousness to a computer. That to me is like you're trapped.
No, you're free on the internet then.
I mean, a copy of you is.
Yeah, there was a version of me that was very enthusiastic about Elon Musk's Neuralink, and that's like the chip implants. And I think a lot of people just look at that and think about it, helping people with muscle control issues and helping them to be able to interface with their limbs. But reading into that, like ultimately he has this idea of literally, getting your brain and connecting it to the internet, and eventually you don't need your body at all. It's insanity, but that does still appeal to me a lot. The idea of, I get very frustrated that I'm stuck in the body. Like I'm going to Australia in a week, and that I have to go on a plane for 12 hours. Silly.
Guess, to me, I don't think I could ever trust technology enough to know,
or the person in charge of
that
the tech.
Your brain is a Windows computer that is starting up and just freezes. And like, what is that like when your consciousness freezes and needs to be restarted? Is that like...
there's a Black Mirror that kind of goes into that idea, and I think it's one of their Christmas episodes, and it is like a small hell.
I love Black Mirror, but that's also one that I can only take in doses
because it's so dark.
Yes.
Brian Johnson is someone who I'm also fascinated by, this idea that he's trying to make his body live for as long as possible. I should reach out to him and see if he wants to talk, because it's fascinating. These people that have an incredible wealth and are using it to try and like live forever, it's fascinating to me. It's like incredibly self-involved, and I think it's all never going to work, but I find it interesting that they're trying. I mean, ultimately it's a massive waste of money. I just find it fascinating.
Well, I think what Lewis said, like to me, that when you're doing that, you're dedicating your whole existence and your life to living forever.
Yeah.
Like that's where it becomes a little grueling to me, where
all Brian Johnson's day is like, now I'm eating this like small bit of protein.
Yeah.
Now I have to have this juice sack. Now I'm going into this red light for an hour.
Instead
now
of
I'm getting infused with my kid's blood.
Your existence that you want to prolong and keep going forever. Like, is there a point where like you got to an age and it's like, all right, now I'm gonna go vacation and enjoy this and do this work that's fulfilling?
It's a really good point. And the other thing is he'll probably get hit by a bus.
Yeah, you can never...
And he'll be like, I wish I'd actually lived and had something else, but no, I spent my whole time injecting my child's blood into my butt.
All right, you asked me some questions. Let's get you a couple of these.
Okay, hit me. This death deck is quite good. It's just the idea of the death deck is it kind of makes things
fun. Makes death fun.
It's death fun.
If you could send one post-death message from beyond, what would you tell your family?
Oh, that's so nice. I'd just say, sorry that I was a bit annoying sometimes, but I love you a lot. I'm dead. Death is, hi.
Hi. Okay, you've just received a prognosis of 6 months to live, but you feel pretty healthy. That's also my nightmare.
Yeah.
How do you spend your time?
Oh, I mean, that's the ultimate refocus, right? I'm obsessed with closure. It's like a real problem for me. I hate loose ends. And right now I feel like I have so many loose ends with like people and things and work. I think I'd be quite manic. It wouldn't be a good time for me. I'd just be desperately trying to like make sure things had closure on them. Like someone that like didn't like a thing I did, wanting to make sure they're okay now. It wouldn't be a fun time.
Would you keep making the podcast those 6 months?
I'm dedicated.
Yeah.
I'm dedicated to Flightless Bird.
Once
a week.
2 a week, maybe?
Yeah. I think maybe I'd take the last week off. I'd be like, Rob, just give me this like last week and I'm not going to do the pod.
I'll fill in.
Our final episode would be good though.
Yeah.
I think it'd get some good numbers. It's like, I'm about to, this is death.
Well, hopefully not. All right, David.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky you.
Mm-hmm.
You get to relive one day in your life before you die. Which would it be?
Oh my God. It would be re-meeting like the love of my life that all went off the rails. It would be just redoing that. It would be day one of that.
Who's the love of your life?
I can't go into that. It's too complicated. But it's a different podcast. But no, it would be that day again because it was great.
How old were you?
I was 21.
Does this person know that they were the love of your life?
They're probably aware of it. Yeah.
Well, now that you said you met them when you were 21.
Yeah,
and
this is me. No, it would be reliving that day before like I bungled everything up. And that's what I was talking about with closure. Like I'm obsessed with it, and like things that went wrong or I didn't do in the way I wanted to do, that like plays on my mind again and again.
Well, I don't think that question was you relive it and change the actions of it. It's just
that day.
Yeah, you're okay.
Oh no, I just do the day.
You want to relive the day before.
Yeah, before everything went bung. Or it would be the first time I took the Jurassic Park ride at Universal Studios, because I love that ride. And it's before they changed it around for the new Jurassic World stuff, pure Jurassic Park. That was great. Or it would be probably a day with Frisky, my pet goat. That was like, those were good days.
Mm-hmm.
Young, no worries, running around in New Zealand. It was great. Yeah. What about you? What would be one day? Like a good day.
Because it's got to be like a day with both of the boys.
Be the kids. You can't leave them out.
Yeah. So
just a good day with the family.
Yeah.
You know what, Rob? You've got that now. That's so nice.
Yep.
You can go home from the studio and you can have that. And that's kind of beautiful. So yeah, in summary, death dueling, I think it's a cool thing to have. A lot of my friends have babies, and so I've been introduced to the idea of there being birth doulas, which is one thing. But the idea of a death doula, I think, I think talking to people that have spent a lot of time thinking about death and what it represents, I think talking to them can only be a good thing. And I found the death meditation, I think it did remove a little bit of fear of it, because it's like confronting it and thinking about it and not just desperately trying to distract myself with anything else. I think it's just confronting it early and not just pretending it's never going to happen. I think that's hugely important.
Well, and I think talking about it helps. Like, so much of the fear of it is how alone you are
completely
when it happens, and then beyond it happening.
And I think in America and New Zealand as well, I mean, certainly a big thing in Western culture is just like, if old people, what do? We pay money and we put them away in a home and we don't think about it. And I think that's a bung way to think about things, like just shipping people off. And I think that's something America, we focus too much on medicine and prolonging things as opposed to what do we actually want our life to look at the end that's actually valuable and social, and not just alone in a hospital ward with like these generic carers around.
Yeah.
All right. Feedback. I wanted to say the email address is flightlessbirdchat@gmail.com. Everyone is writing these really beautiful emails. Even if people agree with us, they're beautiful. If they disagree with us, they're also sane. Like, there's no one writing in disagreeing, total being like, insanity. You're a piece of shit. So I just wanted to call that out. Everyone's been really amazing.
Not yet. But yeah, I have been surprised at how nice and constructive all of the feedback seems to be. Seems like people that listen to the show are very smart and very nice people.
It's the best thing. And we wish we could reply to everyone. We can't, but please know we're reading all the messages. If we read them all and replied, we wouldn't have time to make the show, basically. So that election, we talked about this a lot. It was a harrowing episode to make because we realized like there was no winning. We're going to annoy everyone in some way.
And we know people didn't want to relive that.
And people don't want to relive it. But in saying that, we are really proud of how it came out, and the response has been really wonderful. So thanks for everyone that wrote in. A few people raised what was a really interesting point. Like Jimmy wrote in saying this: all of the calls you played on this episode were all Democrats who were disappointed about the results. While I agree that one side is disappointed, there's the same amount who are happy with the results, and you only played one side. Very valid comment. I would just say we literally didn't get any voice memos from people that were Trump supporters. That's because the listenership to the show generally leans pretty left.
Yeah.
And saying that, one of the guys that did email me was a Trump supporter and was like, why didn't you play any voice memos? And I replied saying that. I was like, we didn't get any because of our listenership. I also said to him, like, you didn't give us a voice memo.
Yeah.
So like, and that he replied kind of laughing at it and agreeing. He's like, I should have probably sent a voice memo in.
Yeah.
So maybe Democrats are just better at sending in voice memos as well.
And following directions of like, here's before and here's after. Because that was also a piece of it. You had to select ones that you had a before and after
completely
to contrast one another.
Yeah, some people definitely didn't follow the instructions, which is fine. But if it wasn't played, that's part of the reason.
Well, I think a lot of it too was people intended to maybe, and they recorded the first part, and then we're just like, "Fuck this!"
I'm going to bed. I do not want to think about this ever again.
Which is that's what I did.
100%.
So I don't blame anyone for.
And also, that's the reason I went to that Trump watch party, because I knew that we needed voices from that side, and that's where I went. Of course, the catch-22 is you play us talking about our opinions, like me and you, that's going to annoy a Trump supporter. But then we play the Trump rally, and that's going to grate against Democrats.
I would imagine a large majority of the listeners.
Yeah, so honestly, thanks for listening to the episode. I think it came together really well because of our listeners, and incredibly appreciative of all the feedback that keeps coming in. There are still people sending in their voice memos. So sorry you missed deadline, but it's really nice that you send them in. I mean, lots has happened since the election as well. Matt Gaetz is going to serve as Attorney General.
Is there like veto power of that, or he just gets to pick who he wants?
My understanding is he can just pick who he wants.
Like Congress can't step in and be like, or the Republican Party can't step in and be like, we don't want that guy?
No, I think technically they could, but I think there's so many people there that back Trump that's not going to happen.
Right.
So it is possible. I just don't think it's going to happen in this case. I wanted to read out something that a Republican Senator, Mark Wayne Mullins, said about Matt Gaetz last year to CNN. He said, "There's a reason why no one in Congress came and defended him, because we had all seen the videos he was showing on the House floor that all of us had walked away of the girls that he had slept with. He would brag about how he would crush ED medicine and chase it with an energy drink so he could go all night."
Yeah, I read an article today too that was about people's reaction when that was announced. They thought it was a joke, like the Republicans on the floor, and like how shocked a lot of them were, and
the Republican Party, there will be tensions within that as well. Elon Musk has been tapped to head what's been called the Department of Government Efficiency, which is just like Musk doing a little joke and having it come out as Doge, which is an acronym for his like coin that he released.
And it oversees a bunch of his business ventures, right?
Yeah. So it's like, it's a wink to his cryptocurrency, and it's an in-joke, and it's fascinating.
We can cut this, but just the idea of like drain the swamp and like let's get non-political people in charge of these things, and then just doing this, like if we say that we're not doing that and then do it to a larger degree than what has been done before is fucking insane. And did you see the guy in charge of like the military now is a Fox
correspondent, right?
Yeah, I mean, he has like military background and stuff.
Yeah, but usually that's given to someone who has at some point been like a general and has worked their way through the whole system. No, I mean, he's loading everywhere with just people who are supportive of him. Like, that's his main priority. If you are supportive of him, you'll get the job. Yeah, it's sort of wild to watch. A couple of other things. I really like this one. This was a comment on my Instagram post about that. They just ended saying, "Most of this country is Republican. The Hollywood elites, which you're a part of, are out of touch with the majority of America." I just really like being called a Hollywood elite. I love that, and I want to be called that from now on by everyone.
Yeah, that whole narrative that Hollywood's just being paid to push the liberal agenda.
I hear that was in so many comments.
Yeah. Who's paying that? There's also there's a lot of levels to Hollywood of people that are like us that are not really part of Hollywood but live here.
Hey, look, speak for yourself, mate. I'm a Hollywood elite, and I want to be thought of as that from now on.
And we work with them, and I don't think they're getting paid. And
no,
at least not that I'm aware of.
I'm not aware of it.
So
Look,
if anyone knows, if there's like a paper trail
totally
of who's funding that,
if you have the agenda of the Hollywood elite,
or where do you apply to
all of that,
get funding to push it?
flightlessbirdpod@gmail.com.
Flightlessbirdchat.
Flightlessbirdchat@gmail.com, please. There was the Democrat that wrote in saying they were in a relationship with a Republican. A few people sent in their own stories. Kay, I'm just using their initial in case it's just keeping it slightly private. She was happy for us to share it, but I get nervous about sharing names in its relationships. I don't want to create any drama in people's lives. I wanted to address something that David brought up in last week's election night episode. He made a comment about the girl whose boyfriend is a Trump supporter, and I'm here to tell you that it happens. Sometimes you marry them. Now, before you come at me with pitchforks, let me just say that I didn't grow up in a political household. We just didn't talk about it much. One of my core memories was watching Obama get sworn into office, and I remember how amazing it was to watch. I started dating my now husband around the time Trump got elected the first time. I knew him and his family liked him, but in my world, you didn't talk about it as much, so it never really concerned me. We got married 2021, and after he was voted out, the conversations around Trump, Biden, Harris, and politics overall had been more than I ever bargained for. I think for the sake of my husband, who I love, and his family, I try to look at both sides. If the right candidate for Republican came along, I'd vote for them. However, I personally don't understand what they see in this man. And they just finally said, my husband would never tell me who I can and can't vote for, but I know that it bothers him that I don't feel how he does. And we got one more email that was very similar. So there are people out there who are in happy relationships with people have different political views and maybe values, and they get on. And I still can't tell. I guess it's anyone getting on is good.
Yeah.
So it's a thumbs up. And finally, I mentioned that I was going to Australia in a week, and someone, Sarah wrote in from Adelaide saying Adelaide is obsessed with American bars. Here, when people head into the central business district, they say, I'm going into town, as if they'll be on their horse once they've finished clearing the paddock. It fits. We're a tiny city, but somehow we have at least a dozen American bars in the 4-kilometer square city center, plus more scattered outside of it. And they all serve Bud and Coors. These places lean in hard. So for some reason, Adelaide is American obsessed, which I didn't know.
Are you going to pop by and see?
I'm not going to make it to Adelaide. No. Next trip. So yeah, thanks for anyone who wrote in. It's flightlessbirdchat@gmail.com. Keep the feedback coming in. The YouTube channel is, what is it, Rob? Flightless?
At Flightless Bird Podcast. YouTube.com/@FlightlessBirdPodcast.
Yeah, you can watch it there. And we are on every other audio podcast platform.
And I guess thanks for watching this first one if you did.
Thanks for watching. I'm super curious like what my tics are and what my face is doing. Yeah. Just some feedback on you. You've been like very calm and still. I feel like I do weird things with my face. I'm doing weird things with my hands. I'll watch it back.
I would just
leave it.
Just
don't think about it.
It's a thing that's there, and
it's a thing that's there.
I mean, it's with the voice too. The first time you're on mic with your voice is very weird, but you get numb to it. The same thing happens with video. But with that said, this was a lot to put this together. So
yeah, we have a lot of people like Billy. Thank you for coming up to speed and helping us like get this video like cut and together.
And Andrew Strzelecki, he put together. We took some photos in this space for the doc, but he came and kind of made it a real thing.
Yeah, we wanted to. I mean, the animations to play out in the way visually he's incorporated that with the photos you took is, I think, really special and working well. So thanks, Andrew, for setting all that up.
And Jake's always there.
He's doing all the things, and that just it's such a small team, and video is like even this like. But Rob, like you did an amazing job on the set. Like I feel it's so cool.
Yeah, it's mostly just getting some birds.
Just mostly getting some stuffed dead birds.
The amount of birds I've bought on Etsy this past year.
Yeah, they're just arriving at the
alarming.
House. Where are they coming in from? Where in the world?
That guy's from Croatia.
Uh-huh.
That guy's from the Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
Not sure where that little one came from. The one behind you is from Brooklyn.
Yeah, cool. No, I mean, thanks for setting the studio up. And Yeah, as always, thanks for watching and listening. It's nice to have people enjoying what we're doing, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, like and subscribe on YouTube now.
Yes.
Okay, Calvin, can you tell me what you know about death?
I don't really know because nobody came back from death or anything. So no one really knows. So I don't know really that much.
What do you think happens when you die?
Maybe you get reborn, but you forget everything.
What do you hope happens when you die?
I don't know, turn to a baby again, or maybe afterlife, or be a ghost.
If you were going to be a ghost, what would you do?
Play with the other ghost friends, or go get ice cream.
Okay. Like and subscribe?
Like and subscribe.